Welcome everyone to episode number 2 of our series YSDA. Excited to be joined by a friend and a colleague, Daniel Quezada. That's right. Yes. I pronounced it right. And, we've been working together with different church projects over the few years we've spent together. And I thought to myself, why not this one, right? And so here you are. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. Mm-hmm. And so welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be here.
Right. In actuality, you should be the one welcoming me because we're filming this at your place, but
that is true.
Well, this one works too. So in the last episode, we, spoke about the meaning of being Seventh-day Adventist, and we did touch on the summary of why we are Seventh-day Adventist. But today, we want to break down the first part, which is seventh day. Seventh day, because we believe in the seventh-day Sabbath. And so that's what we want to dive deep into. And I just want to ask you, Daniel, for those who may not know the Sabbath, what is the Sabbath?
The Sabbath? Well, when it comes to the Bible, you'll hear the word the Sabbath quite a lot.
Right.
And in terms of what that means, it's the holy day of rest.
Right.
We had 6 days in which the earth was created and everything in them. But on the seventh day, God rested from his work and he blessed it and sanctified it and rested on that day.
Right.
So then that day he inherited it to us, basically. And he shared that day with us and showed us how to basically worship on it.
Yeah.
And we use that day to worship God as a remembrance for what he did.
Amen. That's a good summary of the Sabbath. So it's a day of rest and a day of worship, a day of communion with God. And let me just read something from the official. Let me read something from the official Seventh-day Adventist beliefs about the Sabbath. And it says, "The gracious Creator, after the 6 days of creation, rested on the seventh day and instituted the Sabbath for all people as a memorial," you're mentioning about that, "of creation. The fourth commandment of God's unchangeable law requires the observance of this seventh-day Sabbath as the day of rest," something you mentioned as well, "worship and ministry in harmony with the teaching and practice of Jesus." So this is not something we make up, right? It's based on what Jesus taught and what he practiced.
That's right.
And he is the Lord of the Sabbath as well. So the Sabbath is this delightful day of communion with God and with one another. It's a symbol of our redemption in Christ, a token of our allegiance, and a foretaste of our eternal future in God's kingdom. And it continues to say that the Sabbath is God's perpetual sign of his eternal covenant between him and his people. Joyful observance of this holy time from evening to evening, sunset to sunset, is a celebration of God's creative and redemptive acts. And there's some verses where we get all these, teachings from. I'll put them on the screen so that you can go ahead and read them, and also just for reference. But in a nutshell, that's what we believe about the Sabbath. It's a day of rest. It's a day of worshiping God. But, and maybe just to summarize, if we go to the book of Genesis chapter 2, I think that's the first time we hear about the Sabbath, right? Genesis chapter 2, verse 1, 2, and 3. Do you want to read that for us?
Sure. "Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made.
Amen. That's amazing. And, especially focusing on verse 3, it kind of gives the summary of what God did. Do you want to highlight those things for us? What are the three main things that make the Sabbath special?
Well, for one, it says here that he blessed that seventh day, and also he sanctified it. And then he rested from all his work.
That's amazing. Three things, right? So he rests, he blesses the day, and sanctifies the day. And I think this is important because not every other day has these three features, if you like. Only the seventh day. And so what we want to do is find out which day is the seventh day, because obviously this day is important. It's set aside for holy use, which is what sanctify means. It's blessed. So how do we know which day is the seventh day now?
Well, there are a few clues that we can look at, and I'm sure we'll look at something in the Bible as well.
Right.
But one of the top things that I can see that we can find out which day is the Sabbath is looking at historical language.
Okay.
Right? For example, I speak Spanish, and in my language, there is no other word for Saturday but sábado.
Okay, that's cool.
Now, in English, we have Sabbath and Saturday.
Yeah.
But in Spanish and in many other languages, sábado is the only word you can use for that seventh day Sabbath. Right? Now, that's one. Two, we also have, in the Old Testament, we see that God's people kept the Sabbath.
That's right.
And we have remnants of those people to this very day, the Jewish religion, who to this very day worship on the Sabbath, which we know is Saturday. Right. So now these are external things, right? But now we can also look at the internal things in the Bible, right? Now, obviously in the Old Testament, it is assumed what day is the Sabbath. They all knew.
They already know.
They already know.
Yeah.
But in the New Testament, we can tell by the structure of the week and what happened, we can figure out which day was the actual seventh day.
That's a good point you mentioned. I never thought about it until now. But even in my language, Kirundi, Sabbath is Isabato, which kind of sounds the same thing as Sabbath, right?
Exactly.
And it falls on Saturday. So which day is the seventh day or Sabbath? And, it's actually funny because if you go to the dictionary, not the modern ones, but one of those old dictionaries, and you ask what is the seventh day, they tell you it's Saturday.
Yes.
But today we want to see from Scripture which day is the, seventh day. So let's go to Matthew chapter 27. And in Matthew 28.
Okay, Matthew 28.
And I love how it begins. It says, in the end of the Sabbath. So this is the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week.
Yeah.
Came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulchre. And the rest is history. The stone was rolled away. Jesus resurrected.
Yes.
And we all know that Jesus resurrected on the first day of the week. Even from this verse, we gather that. So it's very clear here that, what comes after the Sabbath is the first day of the week.
Yes.
So which day comes after Sunday, the resurrection day? Which day comes before, I should say?
Well, Saturday comes before the resurrection day.
So here you see that from Scripture you can prove, the Scripture prove rather that, Saturday is the Sabbath. And even from, like you said, language, even from how people have lived, cultures also express that, the Sabbath is, Saturday. And that's very important because the majority of the world doesn't think that way. Most people don't keep the Sabbath as, Saturday, but they keep Sunday instead.
And it's interesting because the cultural aspect actually makes a big difference to identify which one is the seventh day of the week. And that is the fact that when Jesus died, it was the preparation day.
Yeah.
Right? So the Sabbath was nearing. And it said that when they were preparing the spices, I think it was too late. So it seems that they had to put off that work until they would return on the first day of the week, which would be after the Jewish Sabbath, right?
Yeah.
So when it's talking about the preparation day, in Jewish culture, that's Friday night.
That's right.
Right? So this is where the Jewish culture part comes in handy, because you can see from their historical records that that Friday is deemed the preparation day.
All right. So you just do the math, right? So which day is between the preparation day and the resurrection day?
Saturday.
It's only Saturday, right? Yeah. So there you go. That's a clear proof. And there's other references, like you mentioned. We'll put them on the screen so you can see them. But it's interesting that in light of all these things, majority of the Christian world chooses to do something else. It's interesting. But anyways, we are here to tell you why we are Seventh-day Adventists, and this is one of the reasons why we are Seventh-day Adventists, because the Bible clearly states which day is the Sabbath day and which day we should, keep as the Sabbath day. Now, one of I think the biggest reasons why we keep the Sabbath is because it's in the Ten Commandments.
Yes.
Let's go there. It's found in Exodus chapter 20 and verse number 8 to 11. It's one of the longest commandments.
I wonder.
Wonder why.
Wonder why. Maybe the first word will tell us.
Right. Let's go find out what it says. You ready there? You can read it, actually.
Okay. All right. It says there, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it.
Interesting. It's a paragraph.
Yeah.
If you think about it. And, God is the greatest communicator of all time. He could have, made it in a single sentence, but why does he take the time to expound and explain it this way? And it's amazing how people just ignore that. It's really amazing. But anyways, that's one of the reasons why we believe the Sabbath. Now, obviously, the biggest objection to this is, the law was done away with. What's your response to that?
Well, my response to that is, where does the Bible say that? Do you know the verse that is quoted for that?
So the verse is found in Colossians 2:14. Colossians 2:14. Should I read that, or you want to read it?
Let's read it. It says here, blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way, nailing it to his cross.
There's a famous song, Nailed to the Cross, right? They are nailed to the cross. They are nailed to the cross. And I think that song was referring to, the sins, not necessarily the law, right? But I think people confuse the two to think that Jesus nailed the law to the cross.
In effect, there is one law that was nailed to the cross, and that was the law of the ordinances.
Right, which is
what
here.
we mention here. And notice it says that blotting out the handwriting of ordinances. It's something that was handwritten, right? Now, when we see something that's handwritten, we're talking about somebody with their pen writing it down, okay? And we know that the Ten Commandments in the Bible were not handwritten on a paper. No. They were written by God's own finger.
That's right.
Right? In fact, it's interesting that the only part of the Bible that was written by God himself is the one that's being contested.
Yeah, that's how the devil works, right? He wants to fight whatever God does.
Now, if there's any question that this is what this actually means, we'll have to go to the Old Testament to find out if we can find a similar passage to this one that shows us that this handwriting that we're speaking of is not actually the Ten Commandments, but the law that Moses gave to the Jewish nation, you can say. Okay.
Right. And I think it's found in Deuteronomy 31:26. And it says, take this book of the law and put it in the side of the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, that it may be there for witness against thee. And this is very important because it's put on the side, while the real 10 Commandments are inside the ark.
That's right.
Covered with a mercy seat. So
That's right.
that's a clear distinction right there.
Yes, and it really shows us there it's a witness against them, and that's the same wording that is used in Colossians.
Yeah.
Right, where it's talking about what was nailed on the cross was that was a witness against them.
Mm-hmm. That's very important. That's a clear distinction. So you have the ceremonial law, which was done away with, but you have now the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments,
That's
the
right.
law that God himself gave to his people, which is eternal like himself.
Yes, and there is many ways we can know that this law is eternal, right? And a lot of people say that the 10 Commandments were given to the Jewish nation, right? But was there a Jewish nation established in the times of Joseph, for example?
No.
No, right? It had not become a nation just yet.
Right.
And yet, what did Joseph say in response to when Potiphar's wife tried to get him to lay with her?
I think he said, how can I sin against God? How can I do this great evil against God?
But how did he know that was a sin against God if the 10 Commandments were not present yet?
There must have been the 10 Commandments at that time. That's the only conclusion.
One thing that I know from history is that not everything in history was written down.
Right.
Right? I think writing was introduced a lot later. A lot of things were passed down by stories. Right?
Yeah.
So there may have not been a need to write the law down as it was passed down from generation to generation. But at some point, I believe people began to forget.
Right.
Right? And things needed to be written down as our memories were sparse. And, I think the true gospel would be lost.
Yeah. I think that's the reason why God had to give us a Bible anyways, because we would forget.
Yeah.
Our minds slowly have, lost the capacity to hold things over time. Now, there are many different churches around the world. Well, not many, but a couple of churches that keep Sabbath as well. You have Seventh-day Baptists, Church of God, Sabbatarian Adventists, Sabbatarian Pentecostalists, Sabbatarian British Israelites, and obviously the Jewish people as well. So what's so unique about SDA in terms of the Sabbath? How are we different?
I can't really attest for uniqueness in the sense of like how different we keep it versus the others, because I don't know how they keep their Sabbath per se, right? But for us, I believe the Sabbath is what it represents, the meaning behind it, right? It's not just a day that we keep by the letter of the law. Okay, let's not do anything on the Sabbath.
Right.
But it's the meaning behind that. Can you just imagine that the Sabbath day was something that the Creator, the God of the whole universe, whose domain is spanning, again, the whole universe.
Right.
And he picks one day to say, I'm going to spend this day with these people.
Wow. He takes time out of his busy schedule, right?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I mean, how would that feel to know that your Creator has designated a day to spend with you? How much meaning would be behind that?
Wow.
And I think that's the meaning that as Adventists we attempt to grasp.
Right.
And it's something that's so profound that, we can attempt to grasp it, but, so I think really that's what I think as Adventists, that's the difference right there is that we see a deeper meaning other than just a day where we just sit down and relax. And there's more than just sitting down and relaxing that day.
I love that. Yeah, I agree with you. So there's so much to the Sabbath than just a day. Like we tried, prove Saturday, but it's more than just Saturday, right?
Yes.
And there's a few quotes I want to read here from a book by a guy called Arthur W. Spalding. I hope I pronounced that right. He speaks about what does the Sabbath mean, and he dedicates few chapters on that. And here's what he says. He says, you will note that Sabbath in its meaning goes behind the idea of time. It is a state, an experience. Then he says, you may rest, Sabbatize, upon a day, but the day is not the rest. It is the rest day. It's like the day of resting, but that rest is something deeper than just that day as well. And he says here, to be sure, by a rhetorical figure of speech, which is called metonymy, in which a thing is called by the name of a thing related to it, the term Sabbath is often used for Sabbath day. Like we just use it interchangeably. When I say Sabbath and Sabbath day, it's like the same thing, but it's actually different because Sabbath means rest, but Sabbath day means day of rest. And then he says, this is all right if we understand the figure, but unless we comprehend the prime distinction between Sabbath and Sabbath day, we are liable to be led into a religious legalism, which is not Christian. And so in our supposed Sabbath keeping, we should not be Christian at all, and therefore not be Sabbath keepers. And he uses the example of the Jewish people. They technically kept the Sabbath.
Yes.
But Jesus said, you don't even know the scriptures nor the power of God, right? So how can that be? And that's because Sabbath goes beyond time or beyond a day. Sabbath is about rest. And who is that rest? Where do we find that rest? We find this rest exemplified or, talked about in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28.
The rest is Jesus.
That's right. Jesus is the rest. He says, come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest.
Yes.
So that's very important, that when the Seventh-day Adventist understanding of Sabbath is not this legalistic thing of, keeping a day, but it's understanding what that day means. And we know that day means, that day has the Sabbath, which is Jesus Christ, the rest. And when Jesus is calling all these people, come unto me, what does Jesus offer to them?
He offers them rest.
Right.
That's right. He does offer them rest, right? But he tells them, but even though he offers them rest, he says, take this yoke upon
I love that.
Right? How is that we're taking on his yoke and yet we are getting rest?
It's interesting. So this rest goes beyond even physical rest then, because he says, come unto me, I'll give you rest, but then he gives them a yoke, an easier yoke, right? So the rest is more than just physical rest. I think the real rest that the world is looking for, that the world needs, is rest from sin. And so Jesus Christ offers us forgiveness. And that becomes the true meaning of the Sabbath. And this makes sense when we look at, Ezekiel 20:12, where God says, moreover, I gave them my Sabbath, that it may be a sign between me and them that I'm the one that sanctifies them. And what God does with us is he finds us in our sinfulness, right? And then he forgives us and he sanctifies us. He takes us from one state to another. And the ability to do that, obviously forgiveness is the first step in that, where he gives us forgiveness. And by his grace, we can now become his children. And I think that's what rest means. Restoration, right? It is the deeper meaning of rest.
Interesting.
Yeah. So after all this, what do you think will be the meaning of Sabbath, if it's not just a day?
Well, to me, when I look at the Sabbath and all these things factored in, I see the Sabbath as something relational. A day where he seeks us, he calls us, and he reminds us of what that relationship between us is, right? He says the Sabbath is a sign between us and him.
Right.
right? You know, when you get married, for example, you have an anniversary date.
Yeah.
You can't just choose any date. It's that date
It's set.
that it's set, right?
I love that.
And on that date, what do many people who are married do? They remember that day that they made that commitment to one another. And it's usually a day that is of rejoicing,
Right.
right? And despite all that maybe that couple has gone through the year, that day is just a reminder of how far they've gone.
Yeah.
You know, all the challenges, what they've gone through, right? But the Bible also says the Sabbath is the day that God sanctifies us, right? And I think that's part of the restoration, because it's not just a physical restoration, it's a mental and spiritual restoration that God offers. It's a full healing.
Yeah.
You know, and during the week, there's so many things and burdens that we have. And I think that's why God has to say, remember the Sabbath.
Yeah.
Because during our 6 days, we're so much into our own labor.
It's easy to forget.
It's easy to forget, but we burden ourselves so much. Our yoke is harder than the yoke that Jesus offers us.
That's so true. Wow. And I love that because, you know, we're talking about rest. What does it mean? I love what it says in the book of Hebrews, right? I think it's Hebrews chapter 4. And, you know, there it says the children of Israel, interesting, this is interesting. You know, when we quote, "Moreover, I give them my Sabbath, that it may be a sign between me and them." You know what the next verse says?
What does it say?
It says, "But they rebelled against me."
Oh, wow. Okay.
They rebelled against me. And I'm reminded of that because Hebrews 4 kind of repeats that story and tells us, enter into the rest. Don't be like the Israelites. You know, they were given rest, but they did not enter into the rest.
Okay.
And that's another proof that the rest is deeper than just a day. Because Israelites kept a day, but the writer of Hebrews says they did not enter into the rest.
Yes.
And so what is that rest? So I think it's found in Hebrews chapter 4. If I read from verse 1 going down, it says, "Let us therefore fear, lest a promise..." In fact, let me start from chapter 3, verse 16, going down.
Okay.
And there it says, "For some, when they heard, did provoke. Howbeit, not all that came out of Egypt by Moses. But with whom was he grieved 40 years? Was it not with them that had sinned, whose carcasses fell in the wilderness?" Verse 18 of chapter 3. "And to whom sware he that they should not enter into his rest, but to them that believed not. So we see that they could not enter in because of unbelief." Now going to chapter 4, verse 1, "Let us therefore fear, lest a promise being left us of entering into his rest, any of you should seem to come short of it. For unto us was the gospel preached, as well as unto them. But the word preached did not profit them, not being mixed with faith." And that word faith is important because that's the opposite of unbelief, right? Not being mixed with faith in them that heard it. "For we which have believed do enter into the rest," as he said. "As I have sworn in my wrath, if they shall enter into my rest, although the works were finished from the foundation of the world." And then I love verse 4, which says, "For he spake in a certain place of the seventh day on this wise, and God did rest the seventh day from all his works. And in this place again, if they shall enter into my rest." Now watch this. "Seeing therefore it remains that some must enter therein, and they to whom it was first preached entered not in because of unbelief." And then verse 7, again, he limits a certain day, saying in David, "Today, after so long a time, as it is said, today, if you hear his voice, harden not your hearts. For if Jesus had given them rest, then would he not afterward have spoken of another day? There remains, therefore, a rest to the people of God." For he that is entered into his rest, he also had ceased from his own works as God did from his. And this is the point I want us to focus on. He that enters into the rest must cease from his works as God ceased from his. Now, obviously, the work that you cease when you believe in Jesus Christ is, the life of sin. You stop all that, right? But even at a deeper level, you also stop from your own works.
Yes.
Of trying to save yourself, because you realize that the only qualification of entering into the rest is not works.
No.
It's faith. It's believing God, right? And that's very important for us, as Seventh-day Adventists, because we understand that keeping the Sabbath is not legalism, right? Because the Sabbath is the very sign that, counteracts legalism, because it's saying, hey, I'm the one that sanctifies you, not you yourself. And you, by keeping this day, you pledge allegiance to that. You show that you believe that I, the one who created 6 days and rested, I can also create in you a clean heart. Just the same way I did creation, I can recreate a new heart within you. And so to me, the Sabbath is a sign of righteousness by faith, that I am saved not because of something that I did, but because of what God can do. Because before I enter, I cease from all my works.
And I think that's when we capture that completely, why the Sabbath can also be a restful day.
Right.
Because sometimes we can get tired, not because of the physical things we did, but because of our emotional or mental state.
That's right.
And nowadays, one of the biggest things that we find in this world is anxiety.
Yes.
People have much anxiety, stress. And when it comes to the spiritual matters, what better than to remember and commemorate a day in which God says, it's not about what you do, it's what I am doing. Right? And so commemorating that, just imagine just reminding yourself that statement once a week for the rest of your life. Just that. I think that's something that eventually it's going to kick in, where it's not going to be just on your mind once a week. It's going to be continually in your head that you don't need to be anxious for anything.
Right.
But God will provide all your necessities.
Yes. I mean, talking about the Sabbath is very important. It resets everything. It makes you realize that just resting in God's care, that God is the one that is controlling everything. So the Sabbath is definitely important beyond the scriptural requirements. Let's say the Sabbath has benefits that are very visible even to someone, let's say, who's not religious.
That's true.
And so that's something that's very interesting. Well, let's maybe kind of like transition a little bit into some scary stuff. Why we believe in the Sabbath. I think the Sabbath will become very important in the last days. Some apocalyptic stuff we're going to go into right now. In the book of Revelation, chapter 13, the Bible seems to outline that, in the last day, the Sabbath will become a very big issue. So much so that it will become the test of loyalty to God.
Yes.
And why would God pick the Sabbath as the sign of loyalty and not any other command? Obviously, all the commandments are a sign of loyalty, but why specifically the Sabbath? Well, that's something you can ask God about. But what we can do right now is just outline what the scriptures say. So let me see if we can do this in a short time. So Revelation chapter 13 talks about two beasts, right?
Yes.
The first beast rises out of the sea, as you can see on the screen, and it has, 10 horns and 7 heads. And this beast receives power and authority and seat from the devil himself. And then, it persecutes the saints and all those things. But shortly after that, we are told of another beast. This beast is like different. It's like the opposite of the first beast, because it rises out of a land, out of the earth, let's say.
Yes, out of the earth. Yeah.
And it has 2 horns. It's lamb-like, very gentle, you would say.
Yeah.
But then, obviously, the Bible now says that it speaks like a dragon at some
right.
point. So we see this second beast changing. Now, this second beast, working together with the first beast, introduces a system of worship and forces everyone, if you read from verse 15, speaking of the second beast, it says, "And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed." Verse 16, and he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand and in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Then it says his wisdom. If you want to know who is this beast, he has a number, and then it's a number of a man, and that number is 600, 6, or 666, 666. So that's the story, and there's many different interpretations as to who is the first beast, who is the second beast. Well, here in a nutshell, we are told that if you don't have the mark of the beast, you will be alienated from society. You will not be able to buy or sell.
That's
and
right.
Eventually, there's a good chance that you'll be killed, right? Now, historically, if you do a consistent Bible study, it leads to the understanding that the first beast mentioned here is, the papacy, right?
Yeah.
And the papal power, that's right. And the second beast is the United States of America, right? And this is not, again, something we come up as Seventh-day Adventists. It's something that the Reformers have believed to be true.
Yeah.
And any consistent Bible study will arrive at that conclusion. So given that the purple power is the first beast, then what is the mark of the beast? Because a beast means a kingdom in Bible prophecy, according to Daniel 7. And so what is the mark of the beast in this sense? What is the mark of the purple power? And I don't think that's a question we have to answer necessarily, because the purple power is already there to do that for us,
That's
right?
right.
So we just have to ask them, what is your mark?
That's right. And for the most part, it is in their own writings, and you can quote them saying
Right.
How Sunday worship is their mark of authority.
Right.
Because they are the ones that claim that they have transferred the solemnity
Yes.
of the Sabbath, seventh-day Sabbath, from Saturday
To
to
Sunday.
Sunday.
Yeah.
Now, they themselves also acknowledge that there is no scriptural reference for this, but it is through their power, and that is why they say that this is their mark, right?
Yes.
Anybody who follows that is really their sons or daughters,
Yeah.
in per se, right?
It's very interesting, because even during the Reformation, Martin Luther was, a reformer as well. I think there was this council that they did, and the papal power presented and said, you guys are not true Protestants because you keep Sunday, and we made up Sunday.
That's right.
And they didn't have any response to that.
They didn't, and I don't think Martin Luther liked that at all, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, there was still a lot of truth to be learned, I believe.
And that's the thing. There's always truth to be learned. Nobody knows everything, right? And looking at the Reformation, even until now, it has been a process of learning and learning. But the funny thing is, some people choose which grade they want to stay at, I suppose. And
I guess
you don't want to learn more, right?
Yeah.
Because there's always more. Even throughout eternity, there's so much that we'll still be learning. And so it's always good to have an open mind, especially when it comes to the scriptures.
True, and not just an open mind, but humbleness too.
Right.
Because sometimes we have learned a few things, but it touches a certain area of our heart that we have a struggle of letting go.
Yeah.
Right? It touches that chord there, and I believe sometimes it may take time for us to accept certain things, not because we believe that they were wrong or anything, but because we struggle with that particular truth.
That's right. That's right. Anyway, so that's the mark of the beast as shown in Revelation chapter 13. So the mark of the beast is enforced Sunday worship. So according to Bible prophecy, there'll be a time when, the first beast and the second beast will work together to enforce a Sunday worship by law. And if you don't, follow that, then you will be, you won't be able to buy or sell. You'll be alienated from society.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think it's easy to do that in this 21st century modern world?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I think a lot of people would be skeptical at first when they read this, that could ever be possible. Many may have pointed to just how much knowledge and great intellect we have and how far we've come from the past.
Yeah.
But I think if anything that COVID has shown us is that fear can throw away anything that we have learned or thought of. Fear can drive us to accept anything.
That's right.
And as we can see that if we can enforce a mandate, for example, for something like a vaccine, which has been controversial,
right,
then, a lot of people think it's a good thing. Great. Let's not talk about that. That's not why we're here. But what I'm talking about is the act that became a possibility.
Right.
To the point where I know that I have had colleagues who no longer have a job because they chose not to take that, right? So if something like that can be done, then that is just a sign of things to come.
That's right.
Because that is an authority flexing a power, and it's a test. It's a test to see what people can get away with. And so I believe that if that can be done, then it can be done in the future.
Right.
A second thing is that in this day and age, the freedom that we also have comes from our currency, right? Okay? The ability to hold cash and to do it whatever you want is your freedom. The moment you cannot have a physical cash in your hands and it must be placed in the bank or anything like that, your freedom has been lost.
In some
because
sense.
at any point in time, a law can be enforced to block you from accessing your own money.
That's scary.
Right? And one thing that we can see right now, especially with this whole pandemic thing, is that a new monetary economic system is being tried to be pushed through. And with it, I believe the loss of currency will be a part of, which will then give more power to governments, right? To be able to do something like the Bible just says right now.
Wow. So it looks like this is very possible given our current condition. And it's also good to realize that this enforced Sunday worship or mark of the beast doesn't happen like a bad thing per se.
No.
Because, the Bible says that the whole world wandered after the beast.
That's right.
So this beast, the first beast, has, this type of charisma. And we see that happening in our world today. How is the Pope treated today? Or the office of Pope, let's say. How is it treated today? People treat it with so much, significance. And he's often invited to meetings that have to do with, where the world is heading to. Things like climate change and all these things. He's a respected person.
Well, I believe it is the only religion as well that has embassies in countries.
Interesting.
I don't think there's any other religious power that has embassies.
Interesting.
So it is, in a way, a political power as well.
And that's a very interesting topic, maybe for another day. But, when church and state unite, that's something that God never, prescribed for us.
No.
Because he says, when Jesus was tempted about, taxes and all that, he says, give to Caesar what's Caesar and give to God what's God's. And I find that today we cross the line.
That's true. And furthermore, we have the example that Jesus gave us, right? We have two examples. One where the Samaritans did not pay attention to him, what did the disciples want to do? Bring fire from heaven
And burn them, right?
and burn them. And Jesus basically said, "Be careful what spirit that is," right? So there you see that God isn't a God of force, but He gives the ability to people to have choice. The second one is that when He commanded His disciples to go out 2 by 2, and they go to a city that does not accept them, that they should just brush off their feet, right? And then move on to somewhere else, another city, right? So it wasn't something that they were supposed to keep in their minds, that these people rejected them, right? Because they didn't reject them, they rejected God, right? And so therefore they have the right to do that, though, because God gave them that right to do that. And we are not to enforce anything against them simply because they disagree with us.
I think that speaks to the heart of who God is and why He hates, let's say, church and state uniting. And it's interesting because I think Revelation 19 speaks about that. It says that the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, speaking of mystery Babylon, which again speaks to the same power that we just spoke about. And what that means is there's this uniting of church and state happening. And to God, that's fornication, because He never meant for these things to be together.
That's right.
They have to be separate. And one of the reasons why Babylon, let's say, is judged is because of that, of crossing the lines and forcing people to, worship contrary to their freedom of choice. Well, so there's a book called Great Controversy. I highly recommend that book for you guys. It talks about how the end is going to happen and how the Sabbath is involved in all that. And one of the things it says is that as we see moral decay happening in our world, where people have lost a sense of morality, and also as we see increasing, natural disasters, people will look to a certain type of solution. And we already see that happening. And what they will realize is that for us to get back to normal, to reset, let's say, we need to have a Sabbath. We need to have a day of rest. And that's how Sunday will be enforced, because the people will ask for a Sunday Sabbath. Because it kind of makes sense though, right? You would think that if people go back to church, let's say once every week, then somehow morality should be, set right?
That's right.
And so that's the logic that people will use. But obviously, as good as it sounds, they'll be looking for a counterfeit Sabbath. And there's a quote here which kind of talks about that, found in the Great Controversy, page 587. It says, "Yet this very class put forth the claim that the fast-spreading corruption is largely attributed to the desecration of the so-called Christian Sabbath. So they will institute Sunday, and they'll say anybody who does contrary to that is the reason why we're having all these problems, and that the enforcement of Sunday observance would greatly improve the morals of society. This claim is especially urged in America, where the doctrine of the true Sabbath has been most widely preached. Here, the temperance work, one of the most prominent and important of moral reforms, is often combined with the Sunday movement, and the advocates of the latter represent themselves as laboring to promote the highest interest of society." And that's something you hear from there's some encyclicals that the Pope has written. I think it's called Laudato Si or something like that, where he says we need to do things for the good of society. And one of the things you present in that document is Sunday.
Yes.
And he says if we rest on Sunday, things will be so much better. It will solve, carbon emissions, all those problems. And here's another interesting quote. It says, "It will be declared that men are offending God by the violation of the Sunday Sabbath. That this sin has brought calamities which will not cease until Sunday observance shall be strictly enforced. And that those who present the claims of the fourth commandment," which is what we're doing right now,
Yes, that's right, We're in trouble.
We're in trouble for sure. Thus destroying the reverence for Sunday are troublers of the people, preventing the restoration to divine favor and temporal prosperity. Now, this is very interesting because I think this in itself is proof of the Sabbath, why we need Sabbath. Because otherwise, why are these people counterfeiting a different type of Sabbath?
Well, it seems like they're taking all the good things about the Sabbath and then transferring those as well
To another day.
Right? But the problem is that nowhere in the Bible does God sanctify or bless any other day of the week.
Yeah, no
right?
other place. Yeah.
There's only one day of the week that he gives that to. And unless he is the one that changes that, there's no possible.
And God doesn't change, though.
And he doesn't. But that's the thing. To change that is to change who God is.
Right. And it's interesting why that this test will be given Sunday worship. And I think there's something I read that God will allow this test to happen, the Sunday law enforcement, to, bring bring attention to the main important things about God. Because I think the Sunday enforcement thing going on in itself is an evangelistic campaign, because it will force everybody on the planet to make a decision for God or against God.
That's right.
And decisions will be made for God or against God. I wonder which decision you will make on that day. Well, you still have today, though, to make the decision, right? Because It says, this is the day that the Lord has made. But it says, if you hear his voice today, make the decision. So in conclusion, let's look at the positive aspect of the Sabbath, which is God tells us that the Sabbath is a sign. Now, in the last days, the Bible makes it clear that, there will be 7 last plagues. I think a lot worse than the 10 plagues of Egypt. But if you read Revelation chapter 7,
okay,
let's start from verse 1. You want to read that? I think up to verse 4.
Okay. And it says there, Revelation chapter 7, verse 1, "And after these things I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. And I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God, and he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels, to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, Hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel."
Interesting, right? So we see that, something terrible is about to happen to this earth, which is the 7 last plagues. And God says, don't do it yet. And one angel tells the others, don't let the winds, keep holding the winds until we seal the servants of God. What is the seal of God?
What is the seal of God? Well, in order to know what the seal of God is, what does a seal have?
A seal. Now we're talking about, let's say a seal in the Roman times, right? Because this book was written in AD 90 or something like that. So a seal would contain the name of the king. It would contain the office of the king,
the title,
right? And then it also contain the jurisdiction of where they rule.
Yeah, that's right. Their dominion, basically. Right?
Domain, yeah.
Domain. So where in the Bible could we find those elements that point that would be the seal of God?
I think the only place is Exodus 20, verse 8 to 11.
That's right.
That's the only place we find the seal of God. And it's very interesting because if you took the 4th commandment out of the 10 commandments, anyone can claim those commandments.
That's right.
I can tell you, don't kill, don't steal. But I can't tell you the 4th commandment that, remember the Sabbath day because in 6 days I created. There's only one person that created in 6 days, and it's God only, right? So It does have that seal, but maybe let's break down those parts. If you look at Exodus 20.
It says, therefore, in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath and hallowed it.
Right. So we see those three parts of a seal, right?
Mhm.
There's the name, which is, what's the name?
The Lord.
The Lord. And there's the title.
He created, because he said it says that he made the heavens and the earth.
So he's the creator, and the jurisdiction
Is the whole world.
right? The heaven and the earth.
And the earth and all that is within them.
Right. It's amazing. Because the devil cannot claim that. So I think that's the seal of God in a sense. And obviously, we read in Ezekiel 20:12, which said, moreover, I gave them my Sabbath, that it should be a sign between me and them. So a sign and a seal can be used interchangeably. And so one of the things that will distinguish God's people in the last days is the Sabbath. And it becomes a test, like we saw, because, the first beast has a counterfeit.
That's right.
And so if the mark of the beast is Sunday worship by law, let's say, what is the mark of God?
It's the Sabbath.
Sabbath keeping by
right.
choice.
By choice, exactly.
Not by
choice,
law.
Not by law. And that makes sense even more why the mark of the beast is forced Sunday worship, right? But although it's forced Sunday worship, in a sense, nobody's actually forced to worship on it.
You make the choice.
You still have to make that choice because, of course, God's people who are sealed make the choice, despite being forced, not to.
Right.
Right? And so it makes sense that the beast, in the end, claims that her mark of authority is Sunday.
Yeah.
Because that totally parallels the Sabbath being the true seal of God. And why the seal of God is being used at the end times as well.
Right.
Right? Don't destroy anything until we're finished sealing those who chose to worship on the Sabbath day as being loyal to the true creator of this world, the true Lord of this world. Because when we if we would choose to worship on Sunday, what we're doing is we are giving the authority to somebody else.
Right. It's pledging allegiance to someone else, right? And so that's very interesting. Well, I think in closing here, there's a challenge we have for you guys. So the challenge is found in Isaiah 56. And if you read from verse 2, going down, it says, blessed is the man that does this, and the Son of Man that lays hold on it, that keeps the Sabbath from polluting it, and keeps his hand from doing any evil. So again, we see a pronouncement of blessing on those who keep the Sabbath. And so there's another verse that talks about a blessing on the Sabbath, and that's Isaiah 58:13. It says, if thou turn away thy foot from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy of the Lord, honorable, and shalt honor him, not doing thine own ways, nor finding thine own pleasure, nor speaking thine own words, then shalt thou delight thyself in the Lord, and I will cause thee to ride upon the high places of the earth, and feed thee with the heritage of Jacob thy father. For the mouth of the Lord hath spoken it. So that's a challenge for you. God clearly in these two verses has pronounced a blessing. If the Sabbath is blessed and you keep it, what do you expect is going to happen to you? You'll be blessed as well,
Definitely.
right? So this is the invitation of Jesus Christ. Come unto me, all ye that are tired and are heavy laden, and God will give you rest. And that rest is found in obeying him and listening to his voice. I hope that, you will give your heart to Jesus Christ and allow him to give you the rest that he is ever so willing to give. See you in the next episode as we, dive into reasons why we are Seventh-day Adventist.